Welcome to the next session, which is Finch, Streamlining Container Development with an Open Source Stack. We have Ziwin and Kyle today to talk about this. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A tab, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Go ahead, Ziwin and Kyle.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the session today. My name is Ziwin, a software engineer at AWS, and I'm joined by my colleague Kyle, DA. Together, we are founding maintainers of the Finch project. In today's session, we will introduce Finch as an innovative tool designed to streamline container development using an open source stack. To appreciate the value of Finch, let's explore the landscape of container development today. Although Windows has introduced primitive concepts such as job objects, which are akin to C groups in Linux, container development continues to concentrate primarily on Linux platforms. Consequently, container developers working on macOS or Windows require a Linux environment to build and run Linux containers. Virtualization is a popular method for achieving this, with tools such as VMware or KVM. However, this approach presents challenges, including managing another OS image and addressing VM boundary issues. To overcome these obstacles, end-to-end solutions are necessary. There are existing end-to-end solutions like Docker Desktop, Postman Desktop, Rancher Desktop, and Lima. Entering Finch, an end-to-end open source solution for container development, initially designed for macOS, Finch will eventually extend to other platforms. It features a macOS native client that seamlessly integrates with nerdctl, a client for Attendees, and an opinionated virtual machine configuration managed by Lima. Finch's primary focus lies in enhancing and extending nerdctl, Containerd, and associated software. Finch's architecture revolves around Lima as its virtual machine manager. Finch passes the guest OS image and configurations to LimaCtl, which then boot the VM using QEMU and start the Lima host agent. LimaCtl also initiates the Lima guest agent within the VM for features such as port forwarding. For each Finch container-related commands, Finch communicates with the LimaCtl and ultimately nerdctl. nerdctl relies on various dependencies, including BuildKit for image building, Containerd for container runtime and management, CNI for container networking, cosign or notation for image signing and verification. Additionally, Finch packages QEMU user space emulation for cross-architecture container execution. Okay, next, I'm going to demo two basic Finch commands with the code and the diagram to explain how they work. The first one I want to demo is Finch VM init. Finch VM init is the first step that Finch users need to run before any container development commands. It will boot the Finch VM. So here, so when the Finch VM init is called, it actually calls the LimaCtl start in Lima to start VM. And we can look into the code. So this is logic of Finch VM init. And it first check if the VM is existing or not, and install the dependencies and apply the configs. And then it will call the LimaCtl start. Look at here, there's a YAML file passed to Lima. So in Lima, the VM configurations is set up by the Lima YAML file. In the YAML file, the OS image is also specified. So Finch pass the Finch specifies the Finch VM by passing the Finch's own YAML file to Lima. And then we can look into what happens in Lima VM start. In Lima VM start, it first load or have a new VM instance, and it will load the instance data to memory, and then it calls, and then the core logic is in the start method. In the start, we can see there's a self-host agent here. Self-host agent here. So that means that there's a host agent to be called in Lima. So it first create a host agent here. So we can check the host agent logic in a separated file. So this is the host agent. It actually triggered by the nerdctl start. And in the host agent, it actually, there's a run here. So in the host agent run, the major thing it do is to start the driver here. So Lima has two drivers today. One is QEMU, the other is VZ, which is a wrapper of virtualization framework. But now most of users are using QEMU, and Finch is also using QEMU. So here the driver is actually the QEMU driver. And we can see it actually calls the QEMU to boot VM. There's a QEMU command here. So this is how it works behind the scene of Finch VM init. And then we can go to the next command. It's a very important thing is Finch run. So this one will run a container by Finch, and the image I'm using is the Hello Finch image. So so behind the scene of the Finch run, it actually Finch actually passed the things to nerdctl and then to nerdctl, and nerdctl will handle the logic. If we go to the code, we can see there's a nerdctl shell thing. So the nerdctl shell thing can help Finch to run the things inside the Lima VM, and Finch use that to pass the request to nerdctl. Then we can look into what happens in nerdctl run, because it has a core logic. So there are 4 things in nerdctl run. It first create a new containerd client. As we talked here, nerdctl relies on containerd for all the container runtime related features. So when it has the containerd set up, and then it will create a container as a second thing. And for third thing, it creates a new task, and finally it starts the task. So the container and task here are the concept in a containerd context. It kind of different with the normal context, because normally the container just means the running processes. But in the containerd context, container means the container data in the storage, and the task means the running processes. So that's the logic behind the scene of Finch run. And then I will hand it over to Kyle. He will talk about our open source strategy, upstream contributions, and future roadmap.
Thanks, Zeman. I'm going to start sharing my screen, so I think you need to stop sharing yours.
Yeah, sure.
Just a moment while I get this all taken care of. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. Hi, everybody, I'm Kyle. And today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the project's values and kind of how we go about running this project. So first thing first, it all starts with our values as a project. For the most part, you might expect this, but we're an open source project, and that means that we work in the open. Now, open source can mean a lot of different things. It can mean just a license. We are Apache 2 licensed, but it also means how we work. So in this case, what we do is we're writing we have open roadmap, which we'll get to a little bit later. We write issues to each other, and all the activities of the project really occur in that repo. Now, I like this phrase, wheel creation is rare. This is a positive spin on don't recreate the wheel. In this circumstance, what we really mean here is if there's already existing dependencies that accomplish a task or existing tools that accomplish a task, let's use those as opposed to trying to recreate something and probably not doing as good of a job. So that's really important to how we see things, and we'll talk a little bit about our contributions upstream and why we do those. But we really want to make sure that those projects that already exist, that have put a lot of time and effort into, aren't just being set aside. So we want to make sure we're taking all those great projects and using them to create Finch. With regards to how we kind of build for users, we want to stick to muscle memory. Now, containers have been around for a long time at this point. So with that, it means that people have already developed this muscle memory. They already know how to do things, and there's already existing standards. So from the perspective of Finch, we don't really want to create new metaphors or create new commands. If you know how to do it, we want to honor that and move it forward from there. Finch as a project is pretty small. There's a lot of work that went into it, obviously, but also there's a lot of stuff that's outside of it. So we want to keep it small and focused on doing what it needs to do only, and then giving users the room to extend as needed. So we all know that people might have specific things that they might need for their particular environment. And we want to give them the room to build that and not include it into the main code base. So that way we can make sure it's maintainable and it's something that we can continue to focus on the core competencies of the project itself. So moving on to some of our contributions, or excuse me, how we work in open source rather. Of course, our GitHub repo is, our organization is Run Finch, and then we have Finch and Finch CLI as our repos underneath that organization. That's where you can see the development happening. But more importantly, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but there's a lot of upstream contributions that we make. And the reason we make upstream contributions is we want to add value. And of course, we need that value for our project as well, but the larger industry as a whole can take advantage of that value that we add to it. And we can help a lot of people all at once by contributing upstream. So it's a really big advantage and something we really see as an important cornerstone to how we want to build this project. We want to put as much upstream as we can into those projects we depend on, so we can kind of join hands and make it better for everybody all at once. So focusing on those upstream contributions, let's look at a few specific ones. First thing I want to look at is two contributions to Lima and kind of what they do and why we did those. Lima 1065 is a pull request that got merged into Lima. It's based on 722, which is an issue that is filed by somebody else. But basically, in that issue, it talks about like some shortcomings at the time for Lima, having to rely on network disks, and there was some some needs to have things that might persist across different things. So one of our team members worked on the adding the disk command to Lima and allowing multiple disks. Now, that has lots of use cases inside Lima itself, but importantly for Finch, the reason we really needed to do it is Finch wanted to do OS updates without losing user data like containers or anything like that. They already have put into that. So this allows us to kind of have that update capability without blitzing anything else. So that was a great contribution. Lima 1094 is some customization features for the early boot process. That way you could configure the early boot process through YAML instead of having to make any changes inside the code itself. This allows Finch to be deterministic and self-contained. It has a lot of advantages for us as far as how we go about managing updates and how the boot process as well. There's kind of a larger issue that we posted 1093 just previous to this pull request that kind of outlined a few things that we wanted to accomplish. And related to that, there are 2 additional related PRs that are not yet merged, 1105 and 1123, that kind of go all towards some of the same boot process and things that we wanted to look at there. So moving on to maybe some nerdctl contributions. In nerdctl 1978, we need the ability to pass in a configurable host gateway and then fall back onto the containers gateway if that wasn't specified. This was an important feature because nerdctl is used in a lot of places where somebody might be used to using Docker, and this adds feature parity, kind of going to some of those existing muscle memories and kind of expectations that people have. So now nerdctl has this, and by kind of translation, Finch has it as well. nerdctl 2035 adds notation signing. And what that means is when you look at, the existing nerdctl had cosign. Some organizations prefer notation. So that was an important kind of add to that. It's choice, and just adding more choice to users of nerdctl is really important for those organizations that do demand that. So thinking about how we're developing this, our roadmap is public. If you take a look at our organization and you go to the projects tab in GitHub, projects 2, I don't know why it's 2. The numbering in the GitHub projects has always been a little bit of a mystery to me. But this is project 2. This is our main roadmap. It shows kind of a play-by-play of the different pieces that needed to be, that we do on a daily basis. So it's very granular. You can kind of see where we're going on these things. If you look at the other tabs on this, the upcoming releases and themes, they provide a little bit more detail on why we're doing the different things in our roadmap. But something that might not be evident is 2 kind of areas that we really want to work on. As Ziwin really indicated, we want to add more platforms in the future. One of those might be Linux. That's probably our first stop on that. Having macOS is great. It solves a lot of problems for people, but then adding an additional layer for Linux people that may be on different platforms to say, okay, run this Finch command and it works not only on one system, it's this, and if you're on Linux, use that. That's not a great experience for people. So this as well that people can see, if you're trying to provide some sort of, those are all things that we have to consider. And more importantly, and this is someplace where I think a lot of people, a lot more minds helps, is if we're looking at extensions. As looking at extensions, this is something that's probably best done with a great deal of input. So right now, it's mostly the Finch team working and thinking about this. Looking at those extensions, there might be needs that we are not anticipating. So as we move forward with that, as people and the maintainers in the project, we want to get a lot of feedback and make sure we're building an extension framework that works for everybody and for a lot of use cases. So there's a lot of information there that we really want to be rich on that can only come from community contributions. So just in general, what's next? As far as Finch, we'd love to talk to you. We have a channel in the CNCF Slack instance. Finch is the name of the channel. Pretty easy to find. You can check us out on our GitHub repo. runfinch/finch is probably the starting point you want to go to. Try it out. All the information is there. You can download it from there, and I think you can even get it from Brew now. So that's an easy way to get it as well. If you find any gaps, this is still a very early project. I think last November is when we became public, and we kind of released this. We've had several releases before that, but we're still very early in the process. So all feedback is incredibly valuable. So drop us an issue. We'll be glad to respond to that. We're pretty responsive on people telling us something that we need to know. So do look at that. And I want to personally call on people to contribute to the entire kind of constellation of different projects that support Finch. As we kind of as a project see that upstream contributions are important, we want others to do that. So there's a great deal of work to be done in nerdctl, containerd, BuildKit, Lima. If you have something there that Finch can inherit, like fantastic, because they're key dependencies for us. If you have something that's specific to Finch, please contribute. But in general, if you have something that can help a lot of people, please do that. So I think that's all we had to cover at this point. So I think we can do Q&A now. I saw that there was at least a comment about 1105 from Akihiro. So yeah, I think we'll just see if we can rebase that. But yeah, I think Q&A is now. Zeeman, I think in the Q&A tab, there's a question that might be good for you.
Oh, yeah, there's a question. Comparably, is Finch similar to Pullman machine? Yes, somehow, but I think each tool has its own focus. And technically, Pullman desktop rely on Pullman CLI, and Finch rely on nerdctl in the virtual machine. And also the reason of having Finch is guided by customer conversation. So in a conversation with customers, some customers wanted to have a simple open source solution, and other customers were asking for point for their customizations. So we definitely see having Finch as a way to collaboration instead of like building something completely new. Yeah, I think that's my answer. Maybe Kyle, you can add if you want.
Yeah. This is not an empty space. Like, we know that. No. For everybody, all the kind of projects that work in kind of overlapping zones, I think it's great. We're all relying on some very similar components somewhere up the line. These are all things that scratch different itches. And as even pointed out, we had some specific asks that were important to some people that were very important to us. So we were building towards that. And I think there's this kind of convergent evolution that occurs. But ultimately, I think for users, everybody wins when they have options and choices. So this is just one option in the thing, and we're all working towards similar goals as we try to move containers forward and make developers' lives easier.
Thank you for the talk, Simon and Kyle.